Hey guys, welcome back to Chaos Theory. My name is Nicholas Burial, and today we're gonna look a bit more at our fusilli pasta. So, last time we created the pasta and the jar and a ground plane as well. So now we can start looking at a little bit of lighting. We don't need that much, just some standard lighting setup of some sorts. We need to set V-Ray as our renderer, so I hadn't. And now I can just create a quick little area light, something like this and this. Again, it's just mostly so we can see what we're doing. So we have this here and this. Yeah, we'll make it a copy so that we can change them independently. Something along these lines. So now that we have this, we can go into here, center our view a little bit, press Shift F to see your lines, and then go to V-Ray physical camera so that we have a spot for that. Alright, and just to make sure that this isn't going through the ground, I'm just gonna take this up ever slightly, something like that. So now we have a setup, and if I go to V-Ray VFB and I press render from my camera, just do a quick render here. So this looks fairly alright for now. It's a bit dark, but our materials or our wire colors, object colors are pretty dark, so that's fine. We create a V-Ray material, so M for material editor, go to right click and go to materials and V-Ray. So right click, materials, V-Ray, V-Ray material, and just drag it out on your selection. Now we have a default material. Oh, didn't get the pasta with me. Now we can look at the lights over here. So this is at 30, maybe 100. And this can be a little bit darker. So this is fine for now. We can go to options and choose both our lighting to be invisible. Mostly so that we don't get any issues with getting in front of our own lights. If we want to be able to render from our perspective, we would need to have a we would need to have exposure control on the perspective view as well, because if I just render from this view, it'll get way too overbright because I've set up the lighting for the camera itself. So the easiest way to do this, if you already have a V-Ray camera, is just press 8 to go to your environments and effects. You could also go to rendering and then environment. Hotkey is 8 on your keyboard. Here under exposure control, you can add a V-Ray exposure control. And in mode, you can set it to from V-Ray camera, and then camera node and point at your camera. If you have multiple cameras, point it at the camera you want your perspective view to inherit the exposure settings from. So now when I render from a perspective, it'll have the same settings as that camera. So if I changed my exposure settings, my film speed or F number or whatnot, it'll also change every time I render in my perspective. So that's a neat little trick there. So the first thing we can look at is the jar itself. I'll make a new material. We'll call this glass. This material will just be a simple glass material, so my reflections can be white and my refractions can be white. That'll make it as a kind of glass. My index of refractions, or IOR, usually glass is around 1.33, but mess around with it. It'll change how much it warps stuff that goes through your glass, depending on the thickness. So the higher I set my IOR, the higher density the material is made of, basically. The lower the IOR, the closer to a vacuum you get, or like no density, basically. So it won't bend your the lighting as much, so that objects won't get obstructed in the same way. So now we have a jar. Looks fine. Let's just check it from our camera view just to be sure. It's a little bit boring, mostly because of the settings I think we have here. So maybe if we add a bit, add a bit more, 1.5 if I could type, just to check. So because we can't really see the reflections that much, that's a little bit annoying. So the jar is here, but because of how the lighting is right now. So let's change this to local and change it to something like this. Put it down here. Back to view. Just to see if we can catch some of the reflections here. Okay, we could, but that looks like shit. So let's change this back to maybe here. Go into this view. Wow, that really doesn't look too good. No matter, this is just a test, so we can always change it later on as our end result. When we do, probably add a HDR or something like that, an HDRI or something like that, and make it look a little bit nicer at the time. We could also play around with glossiness settings if we wanted to at some point, but for now this is alright. I do want one more light though, because we are going to be making a, let's see, if we just create a normal light here, go to the settings of it, from plane, set it to disk, and make it targeted. This will make us have a target we can point to, or with. And we can point over here. Basically, we want to point at the pasta itself. So if we did something maybe like this. The reason for this is that we want a rim light of sorts to be able to see our actual subsurface scattering when we start making that material. So we might as well just make the base for it now. So I'll make a new material, call it pasta, get a color that resembles a little bit, set it on here, add reflectivity and a low-ish glossiness so that it's not, you know, so it doesn't look like, you know, clear plastic or anything. We need it to look a bit rough, basically. All right, so for now this is fine, but obviously we haven't touched the SSS part of it yet. If we if we do something that we don't even need to do it like this. So if you start a renderer from this view as we are right now, this is an interactive renderer. I can actually right click here and go to real zoom. That'll make it possible for me to zoom in on an object, the pasta in this case, and actually just render that part, but from the same camera view as we had before. So that actually makes it a lot easier for us to keep the same camera, but to see how the lighting affects only that part. So with this light here, if we turn it up like a lot, you can see that it does light up just a bit, but because of the view, and it's very bright now, right now. So we probably had it maybe at 150 or something like that. We can see here, if we hover over it, when I zoom out, it's at 4 in our raw settings down here. So the 32-bit value is at 444, which is, you know, pretty bright. So this is more than fine exposure-wise, and probably should work when we start looking at the actual subsurface scattering material itself. But let's just have a look here and see if... Yeah, I think this is fine, at least for now. Again, we can change it around. I'll make it invisible. We can also go out of real zoom and we can see how it affects our glass here. So we get a little bit of rim light going on. And this is fine, you know, again, it's a test lighting setup. We'll change it around for the final part. So for now, this is, you know, totally acceptable for what we kind of want to do. So that's good. So we made a base material for the pasta. We made the jar and a very fast lighting setup. If we wanted to add more or do something else with the lighting setup, we could open up Cosmos, but mine isn't installed properly right now. I'll fix that to next time so that we can look at importing an HDRI from there and making it maybe a little bit better. But otherwise, next time we're going to be looking at the actual subsurface scattering material. So let's say that's it. So I will see you next time, and take care. Bye.